Grüß, willkommen in einem and in a fragrance video. Welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 5 of my figure gaming video series. In my previous videos I covered the creation of 30cm terrain tiles. This is the simplest type of tile and the easiest to store and transport, but the joins do detract from the playing area and many players find that annoying. One solution is to create 60cm terrain tiles, which still possesses joins but far less. Depending on the rules being used, the player could use a single tile or 2 tiles or at the most 4 tiles. For those players interested in trying to reduce the ugly joins in any tile system, this video will cover how to make 60cm square tiles, which can achieve that to at least an extent. Perhaps the most serious issue with creating a 60cm square cork tile is the lack of such product in the market. There are many solutions which could be adopted, the use of insulation sheets or even exercise mats, but for this video I'll stay with cork tiles as I like to create embedded waterways in the cork tiles. Creating a 60cm square cork tile requires 4 30cm cork tiles. However, attempting to stick them together along the edges is not a viable solution. I know, I've tried it. One solution is to glue them onto a 60cm square MDF board, as can be seen here. I use a 3mm thick MDF board, which does not come in a 60cm square form. You will need to use a jigsaw to cut this to the correct size. One issue I had with my cork tiles are US 12-inch tiles. So they're not exactly 30cm square. While I can cut the length to the correct size, which is about 60.5cm to 61cm, the other axis is a bit short. The cork tiles overlap the MDF board as a result. I cover how to deal with this later in the video. The cork tiles need to be glued to the MDF board with a medium density PVC glue. I normally use hardware quality glue. It's critical the tiles are correctly lined up, and when the glue dries the tiles are firmly against the MDF board. I normally need to place a heavy weight across it to ensure it glues flat. If any edge is off the MDF board, you'll need to insert glue and place a very heavy weight on that spot until all four cork tiles are firmly glued to the MDF board. You do not wish an edge to lift, as this will be very noticeable when butted up against another tile. This shows the rear of the glue tile. Gluing the tiles to one side of the MDF board is reasonably simple, although you'll need to be careful no part of the MDF board protrudes, as this is a sign something is wrong. I start with the first tile and then place a heavy weight on it, in order to ensure it does not move around. Then you butt the other tiles up to it. It's possible to glue a single tile, wait for it to dry, and then glue the other 3 by putting them up against the secure tile. The only issue with this is if you've made an error, which you may not notice until it's too late. So I tend to glue them all together. This shows the cork tiles overlapping, which is unavoidable and acceptable. The gaps may need to be filled with wood putty, or sometimes I place a strip of MDF into the space to reduce the amount of wood putty I use. This shows the front of the 60cm square tile. It's important that the joins are as small as possible and the cork tiles are lined up correctly. If any MDF protrudes, this needs to be sanded off, which is reasonably difficult, so try and avoid it. This shows the joins. As you can see, they are visible. While you need to keep the joins as small as possible, cork tiles are not very linear and they do warp, so joins are always going to be visible. These need to be filled with wood putty and sanded down. Even when this occurs, they may be visible, as any flexing will cause the wood putty to separate. There may also be an issue with temperature, as if you make this in warm weather, during cold weather the tiles will slightly contract. It should be noticed in some cases you'll have no choice but to have large gaps, as we will see. When you get to this point, one thing you'll notice is how MDF sheet lifts or bends. There is something about MDF which makes it bend as soon as you apply glue to one side. This shows the lifting on one edge. The other edge is the same. If you are playing a game on a single 60cm tile, you could probably live with this and start filling, painting and flocking. However, I need this to join up with other tiles, and this lifting makes that impossible. The answer is I need to place cork tiles on the reverse side. Another option is to use plywood instead of MDF. I've not tried this, and perhaps that will work better. I suspect it will, but it will make everything more heavy. Initially, my thought was to glue 2 tiles on the reverse, and when dry I would glue the other 2. I was trying some new ideas. This may be able to work, but in the end I decided to glue all the tiles in a single session, and the main reason why I think this is wise is when the tiles glue, you'll sometimes get hard glue along the edge, which makes it very hard to butt the unglued pieces up against it. So glue them all together. That's my advice. When you do glue the tiles, always make sure the tiles are firmly held down by weights. You do not want a tile lifting at the edge. This is the real reason why you should glue all 4 tiles in a single session. If you only glue 2 tiles, there is a risk the glue will ooze out, and this will need to be cut away with a knife and chiseled in order to allow the other cork tiles to butt up against these, as I discovered, and it was a very painful exercise to fix this. One issue, or one thing you need to focus on, is to ensure the tiles are lined up perfectly with the lower tiles. I use a piece of laminated clipboard which is as thick as the 2 cork tiles and the MDF board to help me. Use the edge which is laminated so it will not glue to the cork tile. Secure the chipboard and firmly press the cork tile against it, and then place a weight on top of the cork tile. After a bit of experimentation, this is how I apply the reverse side cork tiles. There are 2 laminated chipboards which are used to ensure the first tile edges are in line with the lower tile. You do this edge on edge, which will ensure the edges are aligned, but you will end up with gaps between the tiles. These can be filled with wood putty, so don't worry too much about them. The next thing you need to check is to ensure the size of the new cork tile is correct. It should be a 61 centimetre square if using 12-inch tiles, that's US measure tile. In this case, it's 1.5 mm too wide in one axis, which was an error on my part, which I had to resolve. While undertaking this project, I discovered the tiles are not all identically sized, which means to line up the outer edge correctly, you end up with a gap. This is unavoidable. I have no idea why the tiles vary so much in size, but they do. It could be the tiles change in size when they are glued on an MDF board, but I suspect they're just not all the same size, or maybe temperature changes their size. For 3 edges of your 60 cm tiles, this is the effect you'll end up with. Once you apply wood putty and sand it down, the MDF board will show as a slight indentation, which is not a big issue. Along one of the edges, you'll have a 5 mm gap. This is because the tiles are 12 inches in size and the MDF board is 60 centimeters wide. You need to place a 5 mm piece of wood or piece of MDF board into the gap and glue it. In this picture, the glue has been applied. This shows the 5 mm thick wide MDF board inserted into the gap. In this case, it looks like the MDF board is too high. In reality, it's the correct size for one side, but the other side, the cork tiles, are not lined up correctly. I did not leave a gap to align the cork tiles in this case, which was an error on my part. Use a rasp to smooth down the MDF board, insert, and then apply wood putty and sand. This shows the resulting edge with the inserted MDF board, rasped down and covered with wood putty. This will be smoothed down when the wood putty is dry. This shows the completed 2-foot square cork tile. The gaps need to be filled with wood putty, as does the edges. After this is complete, it is ready for an undercoat. This shows the 2-foot square tile painted, at least with undercoat. It's very important to ensure the edges do not have any built up of paint. These need to remain as smooth as possible so they can join up with the other tile. I use an undercoat because cork absorbs paint, so I discovered if I use my base paint colour, I needed a lot of it. I paint it first with undercoat paint, then cover it with a base cover that I need. Green for green flock and brown for brown flock. Notice the joins are filled, even if they're still visible. Once flocked, they will become invisible. This shows the edge. You'll notice a paint built up on the right corner. Now, this is acceptable, but you do not wish this on an edge, otherwise you'll need to file it down. This shows 2 tiles butted up against each other. There is a large gap. This is because I did not ensure one side was exactly 61 centimeters wide. If one edge is ruined, this is not an issue, as this can be an outside edge. With 2 tiles, only one edge needs to be perfect. With 4 tiles, then 2 edges need to be perfect on each tile. This shows a better example, but even here there is a gap. There are 2 solutions. The first is to file down each edge so they are perfectly smooth and flat. This can be difficult. The second is to place a metal ruler between the 2 tiles, but everything up against each other and fill the gap with wood putty. This is probably the easiest solution. When I began making my 60 cm square tiles, I was rather excited, as I saw it as a superior solution to 30 cm square tiles, mainly by reducing the lines in the playing areas. In practice, I found the tiles far too heavy. A single tile is perfect, and as long as your game can fit on a single 60 cm square tile, this is a good solution, which I still do use. But in my case, 4 of these tiles are so heavy they become simply too difficult to transport. You could also use 2 tiles, but that tends to be about the limit in terms of transportability. So this concludes part 5 of my figure gaming video series, in this case my 60 cm square terrain tile creation presentation. Alle guten Dingen, kommen zu einem Ende.